In this video, I'm going to share a question from a wonderful young lady that I met on the plane from Tampa Bay to Las Vegas a few weeks ago that happens to work for a gentleman that I admire tremendously and his company, PHP, none other than the one and only Patrick Bet David. And if you like what I have to say by the end of this video, go ahead and throw us a thumbs up as I'm talking to my girl, Kiana. And if you don't like what I have to say to her about her question, then go ahead and throw me that thumbs down because I appreciate that too. It all matters. So Kiana had sent me a question after I met her on the plane because I asked her, I said, hey, what kind of struggles and problems do you have in the sales world? So for you, Kiana, I'm going to address that one here on this video. But as she stated, I personally have problems with challenging different objections when it comes to gaining another client and or closing a prospect. All right, so let's break that down a little bit. I'm gonna get real deep in this because I think it's important from a psychological standpoint to understand the few different parts of what she said here. So for you, Kiana, I'm going to start with, I know that I have problems with challenging different objections. So the first thing I would do if I were you is that I would write down what problems mean to you. See, because when I read this, if you're not clarifying exactly what it is that the issue is that you're noticing that you're bringing to the table when you're communicating with a potential client or prospect, then how in the world are you going to be able to get better in that isolated case? So whether that might be listening, or if you realize that you're flaring up and your emotions are starting to get stirred up, you are starting to panic. And by the way, these are all very real scenarios. So if this is happening, that's okay. And that's why we practice on the daily to get better. So the first thing that I would do for you, helping you out, is identify what do the problems mean when you say you're having problems. The second thing that I'm going to talk about right here is the definition of challenging. Okay, so check this out. I really want you to understand that different people have different meanings of different words. Right? And I get into these arguments and these debates and these conversation points and topics of dialogue all the time with what things mean. So when you say challenging, there's two people. Imagine one person loves challenge. The other person absolutely despises challenge. So now you put two people together that are working together to try to build a business relationship and have a transaction take place where you've earned the right to earn this client and now you're in business together. But if you come to an objection point, by the way, this is what I'm sharing with you is part of a bigger puzzle. So this is a piece that could help you solve for it in context, as there's many other pieces that add up to this point when you talk about quote unquote objections. But in the event that you're in an objection environment, when you think of challenge, is your first response to flee and disruption in terms of how your emotional response is calculated? Or are you using challenge as the opportunity to win and earn the right to that sale in that moment? Because when I think of challenge, I think of excitement and, okay, I'm gonna go into this thing and I'm going to define the outcome based on my input, and therefore what I'm gonna get out of it is going to be net positive versus net negative. So if you have an interpretation and a meaning associated with challenging as friction and you bounce off that, well then naturally you're gonna have a ton of different radical emotions that start to bleed out, and you're gonna have this frantic type of an approach, and it's not gonna allow you the proper state of mind to be able to continue the conversation in that moment with the person. Because what I want you to realize is that you're never switching gears from a challenging situation to now you're combating, right? It's now I'm going from challenge to confrontation. And that's another way to look at this too, by the way, because I think that a lot of people can walk into a sales situation and use challenge in confrontation. So confrontation can be positive as well, because look, you're confronting certain things that people are feeding to you in terms of what objections they might have and why they don't want to do this deal. And for some of us, we back off of confrontation, right? Because confrontation has been taught to us for decades that it's not good. Why would you want to fight with somebody? So really understanding the detail and the meaning of the words that you're using can help shed some light on how you interact with these people and realize that you're just continuing the conversation. Instead of challenge or confrontation, you're just resolving. And you're working together in communication, you and the prospect, potential client, to get to an answer that everybody's happy with, and that then allows the transaction, the business, the credit card to be swiped, however you process it. So being very detailed in how you interpret the words of this and having a psychological shakeup is a very, very important piece. Now, as far as the objection, right? Because now I'm going to talk about the actual word objection. So as you see, I'm just kind of breaking this down a little bit for you so that you can have some better context how to look at this. Because when you can see it differently and you can have a perspective shift, then what happens is you're better equipped to communicate, and then the naturalness of the flow of the process just continues down, and you end up becoming a great communicator. So the last thing is the objection. So usually with an objection, something's just not clear. There's just a misunderstanding. Now, I get it that in sales that you could have the time objection and the price objection and the spousal objection and the, hey, I have to talk to my business partner, or we're using another product. I get that part. But be assured that when you find an objection, as I said just a few seconds ago, that you're really kind of working together to find the resolve in the unanswered questions that aren't necessarily clear to them, for them to keep marching forward so that it does make sense in their minds. And when it makes sense in their minds, it's like, oh, okay, great, yeah, let's do this. And then from there, it's like, hey, let's simply just ask for the business and let's move forward. And mind you, that I think one of the tragedies in sales or throughout the sales process is that people end up thinking that because maybe they didn't handle the objection right, or they didn't get the deal on that particular try, that's it. In fact, if you look at the data, follow-up is everything, right? So while I understand the objection, if you don't handle it properly and you feel like you've failed yourself and you've failed the prospect, don't worry, because you can rebound and get creative to keep the deal in motion, assuming that they haven't parted ways and gone with some other company, and that's understandable. But when you're trying to earn the business, really staying persistent in the process can really pay you dividends for a long, long time. So it's not so much about challenging the objections as you stated, it's more so about resolving and connecting with them in a way where it's very fluid, right? And it's just very natural. And I know that that comes with lots of practice and repetition and continuing to chip away. See, because what happens is most people get beat up, they get rejected in the sales process, and it's so soon, and that's just normal, by the way, and they abort. And they're gone. Like, they don't ever want to deal with that again, because it's painful, man. That's a real suffering, and that's a real pain that people have to deal with every day. But you got to ask yourself, because this is what you've signed up for. This is what you're charting forward on, building your business. It's part of the game. Is this more important, what I want out here in the future, okay, what I'm building and creating, than the pain and the suffering that I'm going to essentially inherit during this process? And if the answer is that this thing that you're building is more important, then you're willing to go through some of this pain and this suffering. By the way, I'll tell you right now, I've been doing this for a lot of years. That part never goes away. So it's the expectation. Now it's the new norm. So you learn how to manage that properly. So what it all comes down to answer your question, how I see that, and I get there's a lot of micro tactics and approaches in how to do that, and I can give you 1 or 100, and that may or may not work, because that's the trial and error part of the process. Okay, and that's what being a good communicator is really knowing how to embody and connect and communicate with somebody regardless of the objection, how to circumvent something that they may have said that didn't add up, where it might seem confrontational, but in fact it's just, hey, let's work together on this. So I come at it from the approach of there's a million different ways to look at it, and that's what it all comes down to. And so when you're thinking of this, the last thing that I want to say is just define what all that means to you so that you can start working independently on each skill over the next several weeks, months, and years. And then in 2 years, you pick your head up and you look back and you've absolutely crushed it and you're really good. Because at the end of the day, it's a subset of a lot of different skills that are practiced over time that in 2 years and 3 years, you'll look back and say, wow, I am not the same person that I was. And that will help you continue to march forward with understanding and challenging objections in this new process for you. So I hope that that helps. Kiana, if that was for you, hey, make sure you got to send me a thumbs up. I know you're already subscribed because you did that with me. But for those of you that have seen this for the first time, if you like what I had to say, hey, throw us a thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. And listen, I've got all kinds of great content. If you want to hear some more cool things about how I approach sales and prospecting, check out this video right here. And make sure you hit that notification bell, that subscribe button, so that each and every Thursday and Saturday that we do this, you can be notified for some more sales appeal so that you are irresistible in life and sales. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.